After the crowds had their fill, Jesus insisted that his disciples get into the boat and precede him to the other side. When he had sent them away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray, remaining there alone as evening drew on. Meanwhile, the boat, already several hundred yards out from shore, was being tossed about in the waves raised by strong headwinds. At about 3 in the morning, he came walking towards them on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the water, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and in their fear they began to cry out. Jesus hastened to reassure them. "Get yourself, it is I, do not be afraid." Peter spoke up and said, "Lord, if it is really you, tell me to come to you across the water." "Come," he said. So Peter got out of the boat and began to walk on the water, moving toward Jesus. But when he perceived how strong the wind was, becoming frightened, he began to sink and cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus at once stretched out his hand and caught him. "How little faith you have," he exclaimed. "Why did you falter?" Once they had climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Those who were in the boat showed him reverence, declaring, "Beyond doubt, you are the Son of God." Verbum Domini. Let us all be seated. Today is the 19th Sunday in Ordinary Time. And if you will notice in the Gospels, there were two incidents wherein the apostles were in the boat, they were in the sea, and they were in the middle of a storm. Now, these are two different stories in the New Testament. In the first boat trip, Jesus Christ was inside the boat and he was sleeping during the storm. But in today's story, Jesus Christ was not in the boat. He was outside, and the apostles saw him coming towards the boat, walking on the water. Now, what is the difference between these two stories? Well, the first story, wherein Christ was sleeping in the boat, is the story of the Catholic Church when it is in crisis, when there are storms and persecutions, and there are people who are attacking the Catholic Church. But these attacks happen when it is not yet near the end of the world. Well, the gospel for today, it speaks about a great crisis, a great problem in the Catholic Church. In fact, it is going to be the last big crisis in the Catholic Church, but which is going to occur when it is the end of the world. And so we see in today's gospel that the boat was approaching the shore. And in scriptures, every time we hear that the boat is approaching the shore, it means that the Catholic Church, which is the boat, is approaching their reward in heaven. So this is, in today's gospel, the last big crisis in the Catholic Church. It's a big crisis because the gospel says that the wind was so strong, the waves were so big, that the boat was in danger of sinking. And so the apostles were so worried. They were looking for Christ, but he was nowhere in the boat until they saw him coming, walking on the water. Now let's look at the next incident. The moment the apostles saw Christ walking on the water, Saint Peter went out of the boat. He went out. He went down and cried out to Christ to make him walk on the water. And so Christ says, "Come." And Saint Peter began to walk on the water. He was outside the boat. Saint Thomas of Aquinas says that when Saint Peter left the boat and went down to the water, the waves and the winds calmed down. And so Peter could walk calmly on top of the water towards Christ. Now, why did Saint Peter walk towards Christ? Because he saw that the Catholic Church, the boat, was in trouble. It was going to sink. And Saint Peter wanted to ask help from Christ. So he walked towards Christ on top of the water. Now, the water is the symbol of all the sins in the world. The world is like a sea with a storm. It's full of sin. And if you are there, there is a great possibility that you would drown. But Saint Peter had a strong faith, and so he was walking on top of the water. So the same thing with you. If you have faith, you can overcome all the sins in the world. But aside from waves in the sea, there was a very strong wind. Strong headwinds, the gospel says. It was too strong. And Saint Peter became afraid. The headwinds are the attacks of the devil. And when the devil attacks you, no matter how strong you are, you will be afraid, because the one attacking you is a spiritual being, a fallen angel. He is powerful, he is very intelligent, and you can see that you have no chance whatsoever against him, because you are only a human being. So what will happen is you will become afraid. And so now Saint Peter is afraid of two things: the sins in the world and the attacks of the devil. So he saw the great necessity of going to Christ to get help. Now notice what Saint Peter did. He left the boat, which is the symbol of the Catholic Church. So sometimes, when the Catholic Church has very big problems, being attacked by the devil, the Pope, the successor of Peter, has to leave the papal throne for a while to pray. And usually when the Pope leaves the papal throne for a while, it is not to resign. It is in order to pray. And the popes usually, when they step down for a while, they say, because I want to pray. Because the Catholic Church has big problems. It is a boat that is going to sink. I have to call on Christ. I need Christ. Because keep in mind, Christ was not in the boat. He was outside. And so sometimes the Pope has to do that. He has to leave the boat, walk into the water, and approach Christ to beg him to enter the boat. And St. Thomas of Aquinas says that Christ precisely allows big problems in the Catholic Church to train the successors of Peter to imitate Saint Peter and step down from the papal throne in order to pray. And indeed, Saint Peter begged Christ to bring him to the boat, and Saint Peter, who seems to have left the boat for a while, has now returned to the boat with Jesus Christ. And what happened? The wind calmed down and the waves stopped. And there was total peace and calmness in the sea, and the boat safely reached the shore. So the question arises, when Christ was not in the boat, what happened to the Catholic Church, the boat? Their faith weakened. It became so weak. They were so afraid And so Christ had to scold them. Why did you doubt? Because their faith was becoming weak. And so Saint Peter and his successor, the Pope, have to bring Christ back into the boat in order to strengthen their faith. Now, did you notice that you have to be in the boat to be saved? Even Saint Peter, who was the first pope, had to be in the boat to be saved. When he was in the sea, he was in danger of drowning. So the same thing with us. We have to make sure that we are inside the boat. Because if we are outside, we would drown and lose our souls. And the only way we can make sure we are safely inside the boat is if we have faith. And so you will notice in our next Masses, starting on the 20th Sunday, next Sunday, up to the Feast of Christ the King, November, Holy Mother, the Church, in the sacrifice of the Mass, will review with us how to acquire this faith that will enable us to be inside the boat. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.